Most people think that their childhood is over. But if you've ever felt abandoned, rejected, anxious in relationships, terrified of disappointing people, or like you're never quite enough, then part of your childhood may still be shaping your life every single day. And the strange part is, most people don't even realize that it's happening. Today, we're talking about inner child healing, what it actually means, and why understanding it can completely change the way you see yourself. Hello, beautiful beings. Welcome back to The Expanding Soul. I'm Kristen, and today we're talking about healing that inner child that resides inside of all of us. Let's dig in. Let's start with determining how we know if our inner child needs healing by going over 5 signs. One of the biggest signs is if you struggle with toxic shame. Everyone feels shame, but toxic shame is different because it's not something that comes and goes. It's more embedded into the mind and seems to become a part of your identity. You might feel worthless or suffer from low self-esteem or even from hating yourself. Another sign you may need to heal your inner child is if you overthink and try to suppress your emotions with logic. When we're kids, everything we do is triggered by our feelings. So when a person, situation, or event suppresses our feelings somehow, it gets ingrained in us that we need to continue to suppress our emotions in order to survive. It's also a sign if you struggle with anxiety or depression. I'm not saying that healing your inner child will cure your anxiety or depression. There's no solid evidence for that. But it is very common for inner child wounds to manifest in our nervous systems as sadness and anxiousness. The 4th sign is if you struggle with a loss of identity. This is that moment where you look up one day and wonder, who the hell even am I? If you were never able to establish your identity as a child, it's easy to just move with the flow of life. You become someone's wife, someone's husband. You're the nurse or the teacher. You're the mom or the dad. And somewhere along the way, you realize you never actually discovered who you are, what you enjoy, and what brings you happiness. And the final sign that we'll talk about today is if you have a lack of self-confidence. You may have at some point felt like you weren't enough the way you are. And in order to minimize feeling that way, your nervous system learned to say the things to yourself that you think others are thinking, because it won't hurt as bad if you say it first. These 5 signs aren't the only signs of needing to heal your inner child, though. I won't go over all of the signs because it's a lot, but a few of the others include an insistent drive to overachieve, being rigid and perfectionistic, constant self-criticism, and struggling with any form of addiction. Now, before we get into how to heal our inner child, we need to first go over what our inner child even is and how it gets wounded in the first place. After all, we can't heal anything that we don't fully understand. So obviously, your inner child isn't a literal physical child living inside of your head. Your inner child is more of a psychological concept that represents the childlike traits of your subconscious mind. This is where everything that makes up the earliest years of your life live. all of the emotions, beliefs, memories, and behavior patterns. And this inner child is actually what guides many of our emotions and gut reactions. When your inner child is living in a state of happiness, you can be more in tune with things like experiencing joy, innocence, curiosity, and raw creativity. But when you're living with a wounded inner child, your adult life may look like sudden bursts of anger, intense fear of abandonment, or even a deep sense of feeling unworthy. So if you do have early childhood trauma where you know your inner child was hurt, you absolutely should work on healing that inner child if you haven't started already. And even if you don't have childhood trauma, it doesn't mean that healing your inner child wouldn't completely change your life too. Our inner child can be wounded from things we wouldn't necessarily classify as abuse. For example, say you were crying because of a broken toy and one of your parents said, "Oh, stop crying. It's just a toy. It's no big deal." They aren't trying to be cruel by any means. They're just trying to teach you that you don't need to cry over everything that goes wrong. But a child's subconsciousness doesn't necessarily understand it that way. It understands it as, my grief is unacceptable. If I show my feelings, I'll push people I love away. I think what's really cool about psychology is that it gives us tools like this that we wouldn't know otherwise. And now, as we raise our children and try to raise them better, we know that in that example, we just need to explain to our kids, "Hey, buddy, it's going to be okay. It's okay to be sad. That was your favorite toy, and it really sucks that it broke, doesn't it? It's probably good in the long run, though, because it showed us how much you really love your toys, right? Let's thank this toy for showing us that and tell it how well we'll be sure to take care of our next toy so it doesn't happen again." That kind of parenting really changes the game for the next generation. Another example of a childhood wound not necessarily caused from severe trauma also comes from a well-intentioned parent. It's very common for parents who love their children to take protecting their kids a little bit too far. If a parent overprotects their child, they may do things like shield their child from failure, or make every decision for them, or never let them take age-appropriate risks. These things can stop the emergence of the child's autonomy, and the subconscious can learn, I am fragile. I'm incapable of handling the world without someone else doing it for me. And just one more example to show that these wounds don't always happen because of our parents at all. This is one that I personally relate to, and I bet many of you will as well. Say there's a child who is overweight and feels different from many of their classmates. They might be the last one who's picked in sports. They might be bullied or rejected and sit at the edge of social circles. Even with a perfect life at home, that child's subconscious can learn, I am fundamentally different, flawed, or left out. Every single one of us has an inner child in us that at some point in time was hurt or scared. And those experiences we go through teach our nervous system things that our minds might forget. things that at that time, in that child's mind, felt like would protect us. But those things no longer serve us. Healing our inner child is about providing ourselves with the safety and security that we needed back then. And we don't do that by ignoring our inner child's pain. We do it by facing that inner child's pain, by grabbing them by the hand and standing side by side and facing that fear, that feeling, that emotional trigger. One of the reasons healing can feel so frustrating is because many of us start the journey with expectations that were never realistic to begin with. We imagine healing is supposed to look a certain way, and when our experience doesn't match that expectation, we assume we're doing something wrong. But often the problem isn't that we're failing to heal. It's that we've misunderstood what healing actually is. So let's talk about the common misconceptions around healing so that we can go into healing our inner child with the right expectations. The first misconception is that healing means never getting triggered again. Some people think that if they're really healed, then they just won't get triggered again and nothing will ever bother them. They won't feel anxious or insecure or rejected. But even after years of therapy, you're still going to have difficult days where something triggers you. What healing really looks like is doing the work to create new neural pathways in your brain so that when that triggering moment happens, you let it roll off. You don't let it affect you, and you continue on your day because you did the work to know what it was, and you did the work to know that you're safe now and you're worthy. So that trigger affects you for just an instant. Whereas before healing, that trigger may have controlled your entire day or week. Healing isn't the absence of triggers. It's the ability to move through them with greater awareness. The second misconception is that healing means blaming your parents for all of your problems. This is absolutely false. Healing is not about blame. It's about understanding. And a part of that understanding is realizing that your parents, like everyone else, are human. Most parents are carrying around wounds of their own that are impacting the way they walk through life, many times without them even knowing about it. Many parents have the best intentions and are doing the best that they can do with the tools that they had available to them. Understanding how your childhood shaped you doesn't mean harboring resentment at your parents. It just means loving your parents and still acknowledging the ways that you were hurt. You can be grateful for your parents and still recognize what they may have missed. Those two things can exist at the same time. The goal isn't to place blame. The goal is always to just create awareness for you to understand yourself better. The third misconception is that working on healing your inner child is just a way to stay stuck in the past. People sometimes have this attitude of, what's done is done. There's no use thinking about it. And while it's true that obsessing about the past can be a very unhealthy thing, analyzing the past so that you can understand it and understand how it may be affecting your present is very healthy. It's a way that we can really change how our current realities and future realities may look. Imagine that you're driving your car and your wheel is out of alignment. You don't just keep driving it with a wobbly wheel thinking that it will magically disappear. No, you stop and you get it realigned so that you can drive straight and so that the rest of your car isn't damaged by the misalignment of your wheel, right? Well, this is the same thing. When your inner child isn't healed and healthily aligned with your present mind, it can cause your life to feel wobbly. It can cause other areas in your life to suffer. And in order to fix those things, you have to address the root cause. The fourth and final misconception we'll talk about today is a big one, and that's that healing should feel good. Healing is often sold as peace, freedom, or transformation, and eventually it absolutely can lead to those things. But I'll be honest with you guys, the process itself can really freaking suck. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes it makes you feel your grief, sometimes your anger, sometimes your sadness, and sometimes guilt. I mean, think about all of the feelings that you've ever suppressed. They don't just go away. They're still there, under the surface, waiting to be felt. So when the process of healing begins, it's very common for all of those feelings to come to the surface. And it can make you feel worse than you did before you started healing. So it's easy to have the thought of, well, I was happier before I started healing. But you know how the saying goes, shit gets worse before it gets better. That's what the healing process is. It's analyzing and processing all of the bullshit to make room for the happiness that is to come. So at this point in the episode, you're probably thinking, okay, I recognize these patterns. I understand where some of them may come from, but what do I actually do? I want to answer that question in two different ways. First, I'll give you 4 tools that will help you work toward healing your inner child. And secondly, I want to give you a practical process that you can use right now when you get triggered by something. The first tool is one I will die swearing by, and that's therapy. If you have trauma, I definitely recommend starting your healing process here. Like I mentioned earlier, when you start healing, sometimes everything can come to the surface. So it's probably better to allow that to happen in a safe and professional environment. But even without trauma, literally everyone can benefit from therapy. You can heal your inner child, have a safe place to vent, have somewhere you can focus on your own growth. With a good therapist, the results are limitless. But with that being said, sometimes you do have to try out different therapists. It's just like with doctors. Some you vibe with and some you don't. But no matter how many times you have to try someone new, do not give up. You will find the right one. The second tool you can use to start healing your inner child is to reflect on the timeline of your childhood. You can break it up into your infanthood, your time as a toddler, your preschool self, and then your school-aged self. Reflect on absolutely everything you can remember. Any experiences, things you may have felt, how you felt, what your life looked like. Even if it feels fragmented, write down absolutely everything. Focus on people's words, expressions, or energy that you felt. Doing this honors your child self and allows you to connect with them again. The third tool is to write a letter to your inner child. This can be a very powerful journaling exercise. Write to your inner child and tell them how much you love them and how much you want to reconnect with them. Write it in a way that makes you feel safe and loved and supported. Validate their pain and explain to them the knowledge they need but don't have yet. Be the adult that you needed in that time. It's very likely that when you do this, you may have an emotional experience and potentially cry. And I just want to say that is 100% okay. That's healing, friend. And the fourth tool to start healing your inner child is to say nurturing things to yourself and to treat yourself with compassion. This can be a very hard thing to begin because many times people don't feel they deserve self-compassion, and it's hard to fake it. But there are ways to boost your self-love that are small, easy, and backed by science. Something you can do to start this is to wake up every day, look in the mirror, place your hand over your heart, and say, "Good morning, self. I love you." And then high-five the mirror Mel Robbins style. Seriously, even if you don't mean it, saying you love you to yourself every day builds new neural pathways in your brain that can eventually lead to you feeling love for yourself automatically if you do it consistently. And the high five, that releases dopamine and allows for you to start your day from a more positive place. Those are some really great tools to use to actively start reconnecting with and healing your inner child. But they don't really help much in the situation where your inner child gets triggered in your daily life while you're working toward healing. So let's talk about a really easy process that you can use in the situation you get triggered. Step 1 is to just notice your triggers. Honestly, this can be a lot harder than it may sound. A lot of times, our inner child's reactions are so ingrained into who we are that it's hard to tell when they're even happening. But the more you pay attention and reflect on your potential triggers, the more you'll start to notice them in the moment. Step 2 is to identify the wound beneath the trigger. Our triggers are kind of like little messages that tell us where the wound is. Maybe criticism makes you feel worthless. Maybe conflict makes you feel unsafe. Maybe rejection makes you feel abandoned. So ask yourself, what am I afraid this situation means about me? Have I felt this way before? Underneath my frustration or my anger, what is it that I'm really feeling? As you ask yourself these questions, follow wherever it is your subconscious wants to take you. You may find that it leads you to some unexpected places. Step 3 is to practice self-compassion. Many times when we are in a situation where we get triggered, we overreact or do or say something we wouldn't normally. So once you understand more about where your trigger comes from, it's important to show yourself love. You aren't the weird chick. You aren't the over-emotional coworker. You aren't the raging friend. You're a human, and you're actively healing. Mistakes will be made, but your identity isn't made up of your mistakes. So if a mistake is made, we're still going to hold ourselves accountable, but we're not going to hold resentment at ourselves afterwards. If our actions didn't align with what our core values are, we will admit and apologize for that to whomever it affected. We will make a plan of how to do better in the future, and then we will forgive ourselves and appreciate the learning experience. And the last step is to learn how to reparent yourself. I know that may sound a little weird, but just bear with me for a minute. Sometimes after being triggered, we may find ourselves fighting anxiety as we fall asleep that night. It's common to replay events or overanalyze our reactions. And as we do that, we can get very self-critical very quickly. In order to help heal that wound that caused us to have this trigger in the first place, we need to provide ourselves with the safety, validation, and unconditional love that we may not have received as a child. Which means asking ourselves, what do I genuinely need right now? Instead of, what will make everyone else happy? Or how do I avoid this discomfort? But really, what is it that your nervous system needs to feel safe and calm? Maybe you need rest. Maybe you need boundaries. Maybe you need support. Maybe you need to allow yourself to cry. Or maybe you simply need someone, including yourself, to say, you're allowed to feel this. Reparenting yourself isn't about scolding yourself or demanding better. It's about validating emotions and creating encouragement for continued improvement. It's about slowly learning to give yourself some of what you needed while growing up. And no matter how you go about your healing journey, just be patient with the process. Healing is not linear. There will be days where you feel stronger, and there will be days where old patterns start rushing back. You may think, I thought I already dealt with all of this. But healing isn't about never being triggered. There will always be things that trigger you. Healing is about changing your relationship to those triggers. It's about recovering faster, understanding yourself better, meeting yourself with more compassion, responding instead of reacting. And little by little, those small moments add up. Those small moments create evidence that you can heal, you can grow, and you can change. little by little, as you keep showing up consistently, you start to mend those wounds that you've been walking with for so many years. You start to respect yourself more. You become more honest with yourself, more compassionate. And one day, you realize you're no longer talking to yourself the way you once did. You're no longer reacting to situations in ways that you have in the past. That's what healing your inner child is all about. It's about becoming the safe, loving, and compassionate adult that the child within you always needed. And we start healing by learning how to meet ourselves with a little more understanding, a little more patience, and a little more compassion than we did yesterday. If that's where you are right now, know that you aren't alone. And I am so, so proud of you for walking along your healing path. I believe in you, and I love you. Keep pushing, friend. Thank you so much for listening to this and spending this time with me today. If you found this episode helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you took a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, or follow the podcast wherever you're listening. Not only does it help support the expanding soul, but it also helps these conversations reach more people who may need them. And if someone came to mind while you were listening today, someone who's struggling with self-worth, people-pleasing, perfectionism, or trying to understand themselves a little better, consider sharing this episode with them. You never know how much a simple conversation can mean to someone who's quietly carrying pain that they don't fully understand. And I would love to hear from you. Have you ever done inner child work? Was there anything in this episode that really resonated with you? Let me know in the comments or by messaging me on social media, because I genuinely enjoy reading your thoughts and hearing about your experiences. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this community. And until next time, take care of yourselves, be patient with yourselves, and keep expanding your soul. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.